are excited to have you in Boston with us this afternoon, and I am excited to introduce our lineup of the day very briefly. By the way, I'm Valerie Cooper. I'm the museum liaison for the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated. So over the next 60 minutes, you're going to have greetings from our Eastern area leadership team, and that will be followed by a robust panel discussion from the Boston Museum's leaders of color to talk about their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And then we'll get right into the heart of the matter, and that is going to be a fabulous tour of Writing the Future, Basquiat, and the Hip Hop Generation. And then I'll come back to host a Q&A. So start putting your questions in the Q&A right now. And I look forward to seeing you in a little bit. But with no further ado, I'm going to ask our fabulous Eastern Area Arts Facet Chair, Anna Maria Bishop Harris, to come in and extend greetings. And I'll see you soon. Anna Maria.
Valerie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm going to have to carry you around with me wherever I go. That was wonderful. And you do our fabulous Eastern Area Museum liaison. And I also want to thank Myron Parker Brad, who has done a wonderful job. She is my co-chair, and she is a woman of excellence and grace. And I am delighted to work with her. I am going to enjoy today so much because Basquiat is truly iconic. He had a way of expressing himself through art that was very unique and that has never wonderful work. I want to thank everybody at the museum who has extended this wonderful afternoon to us. You have done a yeoman's job, and I just think that everybody across the Eastern area needs to become a member of this museum, and we'll talk more about that as the day progresses. But I thank all of you. I am looking forward to a wonderful afternoon. Now it is with great pleasure that I have the honor of introducing our Eastern area director. She does such an amazing work for us. She puts all of this together, and she's so supportive. And again, she leads with excellence and grace. And let me have the pleasure of saying, welcome, Dr. Shawana Tucker-Smith. So glad to see you.
Thank you so much, Anna Maria, and good afternoon. I am proud to bring you greetings on behalf of the officers, leadership team, and over 4,500 members in 80 chapters from the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated. It is my pleasure to help welcome you to another innovative Eastern area offering of art 6 feet apart in celebration of the work of Jean-Michel Basquiat while touring the exhibition of his work at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Today's program is aptly named Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation, because in many ways, the groundbreaking artist did just that. He once said, "I don't think about art when I'm working. I try to think about life." His powerful, often raw work mixed graffiti and scrawled text with the approach of abstract expressionist paintings. It was a reflection of his perspective on the realities of a life lived on the streets of New York in the late 1970s and early 80s, and the world that was emerging. Today's tour would not be possible without the willingness of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, to virtually share the exhibit, their great space, and their expertise. We are honored to be joined by several of their team today, and you will meet them as our program unfolds. It promises to be an impactful experience. This is the latest in our virtual museum tours in cities that have both Links chapters and museums dedicated to African-American life or culture, or featuring exhibitions of art or artists of the Black diaspora. I wish to thank Christiana Egan, President, Boston Chapter, Adrian Hall Phillips, President, Central Massachusetts Chapter, Danielle Williams, President of Greater Springfield Chapter, and Kimberly Savoy, President of Middlesex County Chapter, and their members for working together to host this phenomenal tour. The Eastern Area Arts Facet continues to outdo itself in providing us with a veritable feast of the arts. Thank you, Valerie Cooper, our Eastern Area Museum Liaison, Myron Parker Brass, co-chair of the Eastern Area Arts Facet, and Anna Maria Bishop Harris, chair of the Eastern Area Arts Facet, for their outstanding vision and delivery of artistic and cultural experiences that enrich us all as part of our Eastern Area program team led by Rhonda Starks Crowder. Thank you for your participation and get ready to have a great experience. Enjoy.
Thank you, Shawana, for that wonderful greeting. And let me add my good afternoon to everyone and my welcome to Boston on behalf of the Boston chapter of the Lynx and the Museum of Fine Arts. I'm Myron Parker Brass, co-chair of the Eastern Area Arts Committee, and it has been my pleasure to work with the MFA team to bring you this afternoon's tour of the Basquiat exhibit. Many thanks to Makiba McCreary, Chief of Learning and Community Engagement, who you will meet shortly, the MFA curatorial and tech teams, and a special thanks to Nadia Harden, Senior Manager of Audience Engagement and Development, who is our point person and our webinar host. Our afternoon will begin with a brief conversation with members of the MFA leadership, followed by our tour with curator Liz Munsell, and we will have opportunities throughout the afternoon for questions. And so please remember to place your questions in the Q&A. I'm now delighted to be joined by Edward Green, President of the Board of Trustees, and Makiba McCreary, Chief of Learning and Community Engagement. Good afternoon, and thank you for spending a little time with us.
Good afternoon.
My pleasure.
Our pleasure.
So we want to get right to hearing your insights. And so if you could both talk briefly about the MFA and its continued commitment to racial equity and diversity and the significance of your roles in that work. And then also give us some insight into how the Basquiat exhibit offered opportunities for us to deepen and broaden the voices who are included in our equity and diversity work. That's a lot for a short period, but I know you can do it.
So Edward, I think I'll let you take the first question, and then maybe I will talk a little bit about Basquiat and our partnership around the exhibition work.
Okay, well, the museum's commitment is very deep and getting deeper as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the museum. I am proud to say, as the first African-American president of the board, as of last September, we are showing up differently. Similarly, with the role that Makiba McCreary is in, she reports to the director of the museum as the chief learning and community engagement officer here at the museum. When you start looking at our programming in terms of what we have to offer, which I think Makiba will go into much more detail, I think it's really important to recognize how the museum has changed. It's continuing to evolve. I would be remiss if I didn't call out one of your fellow Link sisters, Sylvia Simmons, who was a trustee emeritus, and she really did pave the way for really for the role, quite frankly, that I sit in. And a current Link sister, Michelle Corden Brown, is a new member of the board of trustees. So we are making headway. I think you will start to see that not only at the board level, but you're seeing it at the staff level. And you're most definitely seeing it in the rich programming that we are offering, which I think Makiba will share a bit about.
Happy to. And you'll meet my colleague, Liz Munsell, in a bit. And I would say that the Basquiat exhibition is a perfect example of somebody who comes from the lens of audience development and audience engagement. Really, my charge is to identify new and untouched, untapped visitors, have them transition into not just being visitors, but actually becoming members of our community. And that's a process, as we all know, that is going to mean unraveling a lot of years of work that really put up barriers and created moments where folks felt like they were not being welcomed into our community. So I am really proud. It's been a whirlwind of 2 years. Some of it has been catching us by surprise. Some of it has been well thought out, but we have taken advantage of every moment, every opening door to sort of catch that wind and let it push us through. My opportunity to partner with Liz and Greg Tate was before the pandemic hit, and we were asking the question, let's not just take it for granted that the Boston audience will come and see a Jean-Michel Basquiat show. You know, the first time we've ever had his art in an exhibition in the city of Boston, which every time I say that, I have to pause. But you know, even though New York is not necessarily better than us, it's been doing a little bit more than we have for a while, and it's only 500 miles away, but we can't count on that to be the audience that comes to see this show. And so we started to say, why would this matter to Boston? And in answering that, Liz and myself and Greg and our director of interpretation brought in folks who are my contemporaries, the hip hop generation, you know, and we brought them in to say, okay, you might not know who Jean-Michel Basquiat is, but you certainly know, you know, who Run DMC is and who Fab Five Freddy was, he would not like that at all, is. You know, Yo MTV Raps, and the first time that, you know, Debbie Harry actually had a video that aired on TV with the first time that hip hop was actually a part of the mainstream media. So they were inspired not only by the idea that they had missed, a lot of them, this moment in time where Jean-Michel Basquiat was just really doing incredible work storytelling, but that they were really proud to be able to infuse their own experience into the way that we interpreted this exhibition. So that's my very long-winded hurrah for Liz and Greg being willing to partner and to be generous in that way. But it's been wonderful.
Thank you both. I think we might have a minute for a couple of questions, if anyone has a question for either Edward or Makiba. If not, then Makiba, I'm going to ask you to introduce Liz so we can move into the highlight of the afternoon.
Happy to. We have lots of long titles at the museum, and I can barely remember my own. So Liz rivals me with what comes after her name and the fact that she's a curator in the Department of Contemporary Art. But she is a phenomenal friend and colleague, and you're gonna really enjoy hearing from her and the way that this exhibition came to be.
Thank you so much, Makiba, and everyone for joining us today. I can't think of a better way to spend my Sunday afternoon. And you know, in better times, we'd be all together in the galleries experiencing the show in the flesh, which is so important. A lot of what we'll try to convey today through our video presentation gets a ton of information out to you and really gives you some of the behind the scenes and background on the show. But experiencing the works in person is like nothing else. So if you are currently members, if you would like to be members, if you would like to come and see the show once, twice, 3 times, please, we encourage you to do that in person. Before we jump to the video presentation, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I am the MFA's Lorraine and Alan Bressler Curator of Contemporary Art. That's my super long title. I've been at the MFA for 12 years, going on 12 years, really trying to make headway in the realm of having more diverse representation of artists of color and women artists in our contemporary art program, and had a lot of success with that in the kind of smaller scaled exhibitions and performance type programs that I was working on for a number of years early on in my career at the MFA. But Writing the Future, Basquiat and the hip hop generation is the first time that artists of color have had the main stage, the main biggest exhibition space at the MFA in the 150 years of the MFA's history. So it's a big moment for us. It's long overdue, obviously. And to create this show, which I've been working on for the last 3 years, I partnered with Greg Tate, who is a foremost writer and musician and was a hip hop journalist, charting the form, documenting the form, articulating the form of hip hop culture in the 1980s, when he was friends with a lot of the artists in the exhibition, went to parties in Jean-Michel's home, etc. So having Greg's perspective, bringing his expertise on the music side of the exhibition was so critical from the beginning. And Makiba and all of her relationships with the Boston community and everything that she brought to the exhibition through our Table of Voices community advisory group were so crucial as well. So I hope you will enjoy the video tour, and please note down your questions, put them in the chat, and look forward to discussing them after the presentation. Thank you so much.
What a wonderful, wonderful snippet, actually, of Basquiat and the hip hop generation relative to his very short but yet impactful art career. Thank you so much, Liz and Greg, for shedding light on not only Basquiat, but his peers, his posse on that side of the fence. And so we're going to get into our Q&A right now. We have a little bit of time, and I'm going to encourage our listening audience, if you're out there, to please put some questions in the Q&A for either Liz or Ed and Makiba. You heard from them initially, because we want this to be very interactive. So I'm going to start with a question that has to do with sort of the racial divide during the 80s that existed, but it seemed as though graffiti art helped bridge that gap tremendously. We also know that Basquiat was from a middle-income family, and so he was a part of the haves, but sort of hung out with the have-nots, if you will, in the art world, in that he was friends with Andy Warhol and Keith Haring. But at the same time, he spent his evenings with the rap artists on the Zulu Nation and the Fab Five side of the fence. What was life like for him with the Warhol and the Haring peers relative to what we just witnessed? And how did he balance that act?
Yeah, such a great question, and you're definitely noting very astutely the completely multidimensional person that Basquiat was as a young person of color, navigating his identity and his role in this predominantly white art world. Our story really starts before he came into that predominantly white art world, before he made the concerted effort and push together with Fab Five Freddy and Lee Quinones and his friends into the art world. He was working primarily on the streets as one half of the duo Samo. And he built up a name for himself, a reputation for himself through these anonymous writings that we saw in the video, on which he signed Samo. And so when Basquiat comes into the art world, it's as Samo. He actually uses, for his first solo exhibition in Rome in 1981, he goes by his artist name Samo, and it's only after that he begins to use his given name, Jean-Michel Basquiat. So
exactly.
So much like Fab Five Freddy, much like Lee Quinones, A1, Rammellzee, he was using his name as a writer, as a graffiti practitioner, and that's how he built up his style and his reputation. So he was very much part of that world. He was not as immersed in hip hop culture per se as somebody like Fab Five Freddy, who of course becomes an icon of hip hop culture later in the 80s. But he was very, very interested in it and absolutely immersed in it as somebody who was circulating in the downtown environment where hip hop was kind of converging and meeting with post-punk. And it was great bedfellows with post-punk because everybody was kind of a rule breaker. Everybody was interested in sampling. Everybody was interested in DIY, do it yourself. You don't need, educational training in this. You can just be an artist. That was sort of just the ethos of the entire scene. So it's really, he does meet Keith Haring, who was also a young artist right around that time, working in the streets. But it's not until a little bit later that he meets Warhol. And importantly, we have to call out art history for telling the story of his friendship with Warhol again and again and again, as if that somehow validates Jean-Michel and his genius. Exactly. When in reality, Jean-Michel was really helping Warhol kind of come back into fashion. Warhol was a much older artist who had sort of had his moment and had fallen out of fashion. So it's Jean-Michel, but also Fab Five Freddy and Lee Quinones and folks who are calling out the importance of pop culture and comic books and all these cultural references that Warhol had been interested in. They bring that back into fashion. They bring Warhol back into fashion, and Jean is part of that.
Yeah. So and we're at 4:00, so we want to get in another. I know the time has gone by. This has been great. Just another question, if we can. That relates to Basquiat and the hip hop movement, because we do know that he did create one rap song. He produced it, Beat Bop. And we know that Rammellzee and I think it might have been Fab Five were the two in on it. And Mary Boone's Gallery actually sold it. So there's a question in the chat has to do with that. Did he go on to produce any more music, I guess, trying to validate himself in the hip hop world?
As far as I know, that's the only hip hop track that he ever produced. It's the only track he ever produced in any genre of music. He made that track in 1983. He curated the session. He invited Rammellzee and K-Rob to rap on it. He invited all the musicians. He paid everyone for the session, produced the track himself, and created the drawings for the cover and verso and labels of the record. So he wanted in on this super exciting new musical form, right? And everybody did. Everybody was experimenting. Fab Five Freddy and others created their own singles around that time. So it was his first time, his only time recording and producing music, but he had previously been in a band called Gray, which was sort of like a post-punk new wave industrial sort of band. So music had been at the core of his multidisciplinary art practice for a number of years when he makes this track. And unfortunately, because of the value of his paintings, he really gets overemphasized as a painter, as solely a painter, when he's not. He was a conceptual artist. He was a multidisciplinary artist, experimenting across all artistic forms.
And that he might be, but we do know that his record-breaking piece, Untitled, sold at Christie's for $110.5 million back in 2017. So he's clearly a force to be reckoned with in the art world. But all that aside, as curators, I know you like to talk about your favorite work, what you feel is the most important piece in the life of an artist. So what, Liz, is your favorite work in this exhibition? And tell us a little bit about why. And this is going to wrap our final question for the event. So we're hoping that you can also give some closing remarks as you do so.
Well, this is a hard question because it's sort of like asking a mother to choose her favorite child. All of the works are so important, and the show would not be what it is if it weren't for every little detail, from our exhibition design with our amazingly talented exhibition designer, Chelsea Garonai, to, you know, every magic word that Greg put into the text, as well as our Table of Voices community members who wrote labels for the show. I mean, the exhibition is really all of these pieces coming together. But I will say, you know, your background, Valerie, is very apt in relation to this question, because we probably wouldn't have done the exhibition if we hadn't secured Hollywood Africans, the painting that's behind you and that's on the cover of our exhibition catalog. Oh, it's not going to pick it up, but this is our exhibition catalog, and please do check it out. Either in our museum shop or online. And that painting is so important because it really was the only known painting that Basquiat had created of his friends, his fellow peers, and artists of color who were on this similar journey as him, transitioning their work from the streets and into the art world. So Rammellzee is at its center, Toxic is there, and Basquiat paints himself into the work as well. And I think this circles back to your point about him kind of navigating, you know, his own class background and race issues in the art world, because Hollywood Africans is calling out the limited roles that Africans and African Americans are given to play in Hollywood productions, and he's kind of talking about the limited roles that he and his peers are given to play in the art world in the 80s. So very important work with emblems of their attitude, such as gangsterisms, heroisms, you know, written across it, and it really speaks. It sort of speaks to a lot of the ideologies that were running through their very intentional transition from the streets into the art world, saying, you know, hey, we deserve a space here, and we're going to make our voices heard. So important work, important artists, too many of whom had been overlooked by art history in the past. And I'm so glad that we were able to bring insight into their practice at the MFA through this show.
This has been fabulous. And I know that the Museum of Fine Arts Boston has actually filmed a concert with remaining members of his band. So some of these individuals actually did go on to, you know, have careers. And I think Makiba wants to share where we could find more information about that before we
Sure. I've put several links in the chat. So before we close, folks might want to open it up and just grab them. There's a link to the publication that Liz and Greg worked on. There's also a link to the Gray concert that we filmed. It's beautiful. Awesome. And also there's, let's see, there's, what else is there? I think those were the two main ones. Somebody asked for an example of another artist who might be sort of working in the similar genre to Basquiat. So I did leave one artist, but I'm sure Liz could offer many, many more. But Helene Flowers recently came to see the exhibition and was just so moved to be able to witness somebody he looked up to.
Okay.
I just want to shout out to Sound Bites, which is a series of concerts by local and regional musicians that Makiba and her amazing team curated, and they're going to roll out monthly. The first one is already out with a performance by Rex in our portraiture gallery. So don't miss that. That's what I'm most excited about for programming moving forward.
Liz, and you should also be plugging the fact as we are open at 50% capacity.
That's right.
We hope to expand the audience. Please join us in person or online. This is just one of the many exhibits and programming that we're engaged in.
And I put lots of links to ways to do that in the chat as well.
And there's also a link for membership if anyone out there is interested. We would just like to thank you all again for allowing us to visit Boston today, to go into your fabulous Museum of Fine Arts institution, and for showing us, a side of Basquiat that we don't get to see, especially the live interviews with Pink. And what we're going to do for the listening audience out there, there are a few questions in the Q&A that we didn't have a chance to address. We will definitely respond to them and put them on the Eastern Area website under the Art Facet link, so that you can all get your questions answered. So if you can hang in there just a few more minutes, we have what we usually do at the end of our art tours is share a few recipes of local restaurants, because usually if we would come to visit you live, we'd go and eat after. And so we have the president of the Boston Links chapter is going to come in right now and extend greetings, share some recipes, and then we'll have closing remarks by our Eastern Area Arts Facet Chair, Anne-Marie Bishop-Harris. So again, I'm Valerie Cooper, your Museum liaison, and I'm going to sign off for now and let Christy take it over from here. Christy?
Thank you so much, Link Valerie. Greetings to the Eastern Area Director, Shawana Tucker-Sims. My name is Christiana Egan, and on behalf of the beautiful, bold members of the Boston chapter of the Links, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Boston, albeit virtually. We want to thank Links Valerie Cooper, Anne-Marie Bishop-Harris, and our own chapter Link Myron Parker Brass, for organizing such a wonderful event today. To the board and leadership of the MFA, thank you so much for opening the doors of your home to us. It's truly been a rich and immersive experience. Now that your hearts and souls have been fed, we want to feed your bodies by offering you 2 delicious recipes by Cassandra Campbell, co-founder of Fresh Food Generation, a Boston-based catering and home delivery service specializing in locally sourced and freshly prepared Caribbean-inspired food. Fresh Generation's mission is to disrupt food disparities by creating a common food experience, because everybody deserves to eat well, no matter what zip code they might be in. We're proud to be partnered with Fresh Food Generation to combat food insecurities in Boston, and we hope that you will try the red bean squash and coconut stew and the mixed kale salad, which are on the screen and will be uploaded to the Eastern Area website. Thank you.
As we're waiting for Link Anna Maria to come back in, or Shawana, if she's still there, to say the final wrap-up remarks. Again, we want to thank you all for your participation and for hanging in there. I know we're a little over, but hopefully you felt it was worth your while. And there she is on the virtual sofa with me now, Anna Maria.
You know, usually I have a lot to say, but this exhibit has rendered me speechless. I know that I don't have the verbiage appropriate enough to tell you how spectacular I thought this was, so I'm not going to belabor it. I'm going to again extend my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all of the staff at the museum who worked so tirelessly to put this together for us. I want to thank Myron Parker Brass. I want to thank Valerie Cooper. Tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Not only is my soul fed because of this wonderful work of art that I've been looking at, but now I'm absolutely starving. Those recipes have caused me to have lunch immediately, so I'm not going to belabor my remarks for too much longer. What I will say is that this is what Art 60 of Arts does. It brings exhibits of this magnitude into your home during these turbulent times. And we are so delighted and rewarded as a committee to be able to do that. Please know that I work with 5 other dynamic women across the East. They are my arts committee, and I want to thank them all the time. We couldn't do this without the collective that we represent. Much like Basquiat, we work as a very tight-knit group. I want to also tell you, it's up to us, it's up to our community to save arts and culture during support this cultural institution. You see what they've done for you today? We've got to do the same for them. It's about support. It's about Art 6 Feet Apart. And yes, yes, everything matters. So please, if you have it in your heart, sign up, become a member. And they are at 50% capacity. Valerie, are you ready to go with me?
I am ready.
Okay. And we'll go to the restaurant and we'll make a day of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've had a ball. And I thank you all very, very much. I want to express my gratitude for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.